could be said that we've been exploring what has been called a state of knowing. But according to language, there's always opposites. So, what is unknowing? No, there's no doubt that all of us know that local joke. What is the definition of confusion? Father's Day in Kuranda. There's several old stories. And first is that story about Mullah Nasruddin, when there's a young man who hears that he's a great mystic, and he decides to follow him around to see what he does before he approaches him to seek to become his student. So as he observes Mullah Nasruddin, he sees Mullah Nasruddin go and sit under a tree, put out his hand, and all of a sudden a bubbling glass of nectar comes, and Mullah Nasruddin quaffs it down. Then he puts out his other hand, and some lovely halwa comes into it, and he enjoys that. The young man can smell the honey and nuts. So immediately he approaches Mullah Nasruddin and says, "Mullah, I want to become your student." And Mullah says, "Well, if you want to become my student, you have to pass a test first." "Oh, I'll do anything," said the student. Mullah said, "Well, do you want the hard question or the easy question?" And the young man said, "Well, I've been studying, Mullah, I've been studying spiritual things, so give me the hard question." So Mullah says, "How do you make a hole in your fence so that your chickens can go and peck in your neighbor's yard, but the hole is not big enough for your neighbor's chickens to come and peck in your yard?" And the young man scratches his head, doesn't know what the answer it is, so with great embarrassment he has to turn tail and leave. But as he's walking away, Mullah laughs to himself and thinks to himself, yes, he's on his way. And then there's that other old story about the very learned scholar. He was erudite and he was articulate. He could debate on any subject, and it was known that he could speak very convincingly about the reality of God. But he could equally be as persuasive and knowledgeable about proving that God was totally real. But he reached the end of his life and he finds himself up at the pearly gates with St. Peter there with his book at the ready. And the scholar immediately tries to get St. Peter into a debate about the reality of heaven. So St. Peter reaches into his robe and brings out a whistle and blows on it, and out of the pearly gates come two burly angels, muscles rippling under their feathery wings. And he says to the angel, "Take him in, he belongs to us." Then there's a story about 4 people who find themselves dead at the same time and up at the pearly gates. One is a priest, one is a teacher, another is a judge, and the other one is a taxi driver. So they're up at the pearly gates, and St. Peter asks each of them to give a description about why they would be worthy to enter heaven. And of course the priest says, "Well, I've devoted my life to bringing people to the way of God, and often in great suffering for myself. but I have done the best I can to bring as many souls to God as possible. So then it comes on to the teacher, and she waxes lyrical about how she's dedicated herself to teaching the youth of today, to give them a chance to be successful in life, and again saying often at the cost for herself. And then it came to the judge who also said, you know, I've dedicated my whole life to truth and the law, and giving everyone the possibility that when they came into my court they would be treated fairly and not with any bias. And then it came to the turn of the taxi driver, and St. Peter said, no need for you to give any dissertation or proof, you can just go in. And the rest of you have to go down to the fiery furnace. Well, the three of them were totally affronted. How could this be? So, of course, it was the judge who spoke up on their behalf and said, how can that be when we've all three of us done so good works, dedicated to our whole lives to doing good, and this mere taxi driver can just enter the pearly gates without in so much as giving any proof of his good works. And St. Peter said, well, it's this way. He said, all you three have done your good works for your own benefit, for the kudos, for the recognition, for the power of doing good. But although this taxi driver is a simple man, he's not got any great religion, or he's not very spiritual. Anyone who got into his taxi immediately called on God. And when they reached their destination, they were truly confirmed in the faith of their quest. This is why he's allowed to enter and not you. So we can ask ourselves, if we're looking at confirming for ourselves a state of knowing, bringing it to a solidness, some place that is permanent, a recognition of this permanency, a state of knowing, but recognizing that in life there are those opposites. We have to acknowledge that there's a state of not knowing. So, from these three simple stories, what is it that arises for you? What would you describe as a state of unknowing? And how does one confirm the other for us? Recognizing that our endeavor is to find something solid, something permanent, not a belief, not even something that arises from experience, certainly not from teaching and knowledge. What would you describe as a state of unknowing?
state without mind, when you just unknown, the knowing only comes in when there's something to do or something to say.
And for most of us, where have we arrived at when the onion's been mostly peeled and its wafers only coming in every now and again? And yet we're not established in our knowing, that permanency. What would you describe it as?
It's like a vacuum.
Like a vacuum.
Not known.
Yes.
But it doesn't matter.
No. What is that state that the astronaut would be in after he's been blasted out of the field where all the laws of gravity and the rest work, and he's now in outer space, and none of those laws that were working on this level are valid or operational in outer space? Where would he be?
Disorientated?
Yes.
In the not knowing field.
And confused.
Yeah.
It's not working. The ways that it worked before for me, the laws of gravity and the rest of it are not working. Here I am in the vacuum. Is that a state of unknown? And what does it bring?
Acceptance.
Or panic. Wondering whether it was a great idea to go up there. It's like, all right, where am I? What was I doing here? What was I thinking?
But you would say confusion, wouldn't you? You'd be confused. That's not working.
Well, the first man that went out of a spacecraft with a suit on, he went into samadhi.
Oh my gosh.
And he was outside the aircraft, and there was another one inside, and he was making this sounds, and the man inside said, "Get back, George," or whatever his name was, and he was and the other one started putting his suit on, but it took quite a while to put his suit on. So by the time he was nearly ready, the other one came in.
Okay.
And they scrubbed it all out
From
the record.
the gods.
But you know what he did? He became a Bible basher.
Oh my God.
Now we know where we're going.
Because at the time there was not even pictures or anything, you
No.
know, of the Earth looking from space, or the whole experiences of being floating
Yes.
out with all the stars and
Yes.
everything, and there was totally
He was
Transformed.
totally transported. Yes.